Everyone who is the one is looking for the last of all. And if you are the one, my friend, you don't need to look anymore. And if you are to my friend, say you know that there's no place left to go. Except to the music. How else do you think I could stop the confusion that's in your minds? Come on, sing these songs as you come along to the music. Each one to his own kind. Now everybody knows that there's nothing to know. Everybody knows that there's no place left to go. When you travel fast, it's much better than slow, cause it's coming down quick, and you know. Don't go back, just go. Don't look back, just go. Just follow the music, just follow the sound. Just follow the music, just follow the sound. Empty and the world is turning upside down. It's turning upside down. It's upside down. It's turning. It's upside down. It's turning. Yea, though you walk through the valley of death, I'll be beside you. Ride away. It's a near and the end, so come on in and I'll find you. Ride away. He rides like the wind. With his hair long and flowing. Ain't no crime, ain't no sin. In his eyes always knowing. The fear is all gone. And the timeless winds are blowing. His motor's running good. And over the mountains he's going. Get on, ride. The world is my playground, so come on, ride. Come on away, man. Like the wind, you do ride. Ride away. Put your past far behind you. Ride away. We'll find a place to hide. Ride away. Where the man won't find you. Ride away. Get on, ride away. Come on, ride. Get underneath the man with a gun. You know that he ain't out for having no fun.
This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate Polanski, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Quenwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. And hello indeed, and welcome to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, live number 7, coming to you this evening, May 21st, 2023. Tonight, I'm glad you're all here viewing. Tonight, I want to take a break from the crime that we've been talking about and not have a discussion about evidence, uh, trial testimony, motives, and things like that. And we're going to get into another subject, and that is we're going to talk about Charles Manson's music. Because if you know anything about this case or about Charles Manson, you know how important music is to the entire situation. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to begin to talk about it tonight because there's no way you could talk about every aspect of it in one podcast. But we're going to begin here tonight. And to do that, I have a guest. His name is Jason Hay. He was on a few weeks ago. We were talking about this and that. And one of the things we talked about is that he has a podcast out himself, and it's called All Is None. And it's an examination of Charles Manson's music and the music that surrounded him. And so, with that to do, I'm going to bring Jason on here, and he can start. We can start talking about this. Jason, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, George.
We're both here. Everybody's here. It seems like everything's going well. I wanted to just let you know, you mentioned the podcast in kind of in passing almost and everything else we were talking about, but we
Right.
did get a chance to listen to it and we were very impressed with it. And so I wanted to call you back on here and talk about it because we think you're doing an excellent job on it. And so that's what we want to do. It's an examination of Charles Manson's music and the music that surrounded him. And I'm going to let you tell about it because I'm not going to try to describe it. It's your project. You
Yeah,
talk.
yeah. No, I appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk about it. Yeah, I'm obviously like everyone watching, kind of fascinated by the case and all the different elements to it. And there's many different ways people can kind of get into uh, learning about Charlie, and one of them is his music. And as you mentioned, it was very important to Charlie during his lifetime, and I feel like it can also be used to almost put the crimes and the motives back on Charlie's with his music, and by uh, blaming him going to Cielo or them going to Cielo because of Terry Melcher living there and some sort of musical vendetta.
Mhm.
And what I like to do with the podcast I've started is just look at the music itself and really not even discuss the crimes at all. It's
Mhm.
strictly about um, Charlie's music. And what I do is I look at the timeline of his life and sort of look at what the hits of the day would have been.
Mhm.
I try to do that geographically when I can. If
Mhm.
I know he was in a certain area, what kind of music was coming out of that area. And of course, as you progress later in his story, it's easier to pick out who he was hanging around with and influenced by, and who he was influencing. So early on, I really had to take uh, some swings and some maybe a little bit of liberties in assuming what he might have been listening to. There are some a few examples of when he mentions songs from like the 30s and 40s and stuff
Right.
like that. And I've managed to find those examples and use those songs, which has been really good. And honestly, when I find some of those things, the podcast kind of like starts to write itself in a little bit of a way, which is
Mhm.
interesting. I'm not really a writer per se. I do other podcasts, but I don't
Mhm.
do scripted podcasts, which is a completely different animal.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, it's been a very enjoyable experience so far. Um, and I guess
Well,
where I'm. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. I just said I'm glad you're talking a little bit about your methodology because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. How you go about doing the programs. At least the first five that I've listened to. I know you have many more coming, and they may change as you get into, as you say, more things with more information that you can work into them. But we'll see about that. I don't want to get ahead of you and start talking over you. But
No, that's that I that's been a little bit of a struggle, as I mentioned, with when he was really young. You get conflicting information, and it's just not solid information. So as I for the first episode, it's basically focusing on like folk music, old time music
Mm-hmm.
from the 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And if if you listen to Charlie talk in interviews, he'll he will mention being very inspired by like music of that generation. He certainly
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like a rock and roller
Right,
per
right,
se.
right.
Um, and beyond talking about Charlie, I do get into some of the characters that he runs into. I mentioned I have a whole episode on Phil Kaufman, uh,
Mm-hmm.
on Creepy Carpus, of
Mm-hmm.
course. Some of these were again a little bit easier because Phil has a fair amount of material out there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's one of the people that will show up uh, again as we progress forward in the story.
And again in the whole saga. Yes, you did
Yes,
very well with getting uh, interviews with Phil Kaufman and also Creepy Carpus. We did very well with that.
I
And
appreciate
also thought the selections of music that you brought for the first episode, it's called My Old Kentucky Home, was very good. The second one was Public Enemy Number One, which you have quite a bit of material from Alvin Karpis. The Road Mangler, that's Phil Kaufman, as you said, and then you get into the Summer of Love and Lucifer Rising. Those are the first 5 episodes you've done so far. And I guess that
absolutely.
brings us up to about 1968. Now, you were mentioning to me privately, you were asking if I knew anything about the sessions that he did in, what was it, September of 67? Is that the next one you're going to be
Exactly.
working on?
That is, and I've been a little stalled out on it because
Mhm.
again, I'm trying to do this with as much respect and reverence to what is known, and I just keep getting conflicting information or no information.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm trying not to make any assumptions this far down the line in his story. I feel like
Mhm.
uh, we don't even know how these sessions became available to the public. I don't think I've
Mhm.
I've tried to find that. I'm not sure if these were some of the sessions that after Charlie was in, right at, it was when it might have been through Phil Kaufman is what I'm saying. I
Mhm.
think the girls may have asked for sessions outside of the live sessions to be released, and it may be some of those. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's very, as much as you think anyone might know about the case, there's so many things to uh to look at. And we're not even talking about blood and gore, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
And
In all directions, but also in the music, there are so many mysteries about how many tapes were made, where they were made, who has them, what
yes,
happened to them. Those are things that people are searching for now, and who knows, maybe in the coming years, more material will come out from the vaults. But
yeah,
you've certainly that album that we're talking, they call it. Is that the one you're working with?
all the way live, I believe it's called. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that could be. I may be thinking about something else, but uh, yeah, that's the
But
one.
again, I think it has a couple different names because people
Yeah.
will claim ownership to these
Right.
recordings because
Right.
you can. It was a free for all,
Hmm.
especially when some of these things were being released. You know, if
Hmm.
you have a bootleg and it's like a bootleg of a bootleg, you
Hmm.
know, it's like collecting Grateful Dead tapes or whatever. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, sure. Only much harder. A
right,
lot fewer things to select from.
right.
So, where are you going with the? How many more have you broken down the rest of the series into what you think the segments are going to be as far as the important periods, if you will, of Charlie's life in relationship to this? And again, this could go on beyond the crimes, even up till recently, because he was putting out a lot of
Correct.
music in prison. Are you going to cover that also?
Absolutely. As soon as I make it through the this very challenging September 67
Right.
recording,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna try to follow it as chronologically as I can.
Hmm.
Dennis Wilson and the more of the Topanga scene will come up
Hmm.
next.
Okay.
We'll discuss Spahn Ranch and the formation of Family Jams, the the,
Hmm.
the band. Then, of course, we will have to get into Terry Melcher and
Hmm.
Greg Jacobson and that whole Golden Penetrators
Hmm.
crew.
Hmm.
Helter Skelter is going to be interesting, because as much as we don't want to say that there was a connection to the Beatles, there was a connection to the Beatles. It
Sure.
may not have come from Charlie directly, and it may not have to do with anything we think of as crimes. They were very close to and in the orbit of the Beatles. The fact that they may have been, they were in the same vibration, let's just say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I don't know if you were alive then, but certainly when the Beatles were out, they were one of the overwhelming cultural influencers of the day. And you would, whenever they came out with something, it was just huge, and it was right on the cutting edge of I guess if you want to call it hip or progress at that time. So you can't look at the Beatles not having lived through that period and think they're just another group, because they were much more than that. They really changed the whole culture of the world.
Absolutely. Not to even like spoil anything I may mention on that Beatles podcast, Beatles episode, the Helter Skelter one. I found in an interview where I think it was John Lennon talking about the first time he took acid was at he said Doris Day's house. So you wonder if, you know, he was confused, because I doubt he was at Doris Day's house, but I could see him thinking they may have been at Cielo when he took acid for the first time.
Wow.
So again, one of the other really easy tangents you can take when looking at Charlie's music is of course Bobby Beausoleil's music. And he was, you know, very prolific musician before meeting Charlie. I was lucky enough to interview Johnny Eccles from the band Love about a year ago for a different project I was doing, and he talked about you know, playing with Bobby in the Grassroots before they formed Love quite a bit. I know Johnny has been interviewed for other documentaries and stuff like that, and he talks about it's kind of like a bombastic story about meeting Susan Atkins and stuff like that. Everyone wants to say that they met or like possibly slept with Susan Atkins. I doubt that.
Or they were afraid to. I'm amazed at how many people apparently were repulsed by Susan Atkins. I feel sorry for her.
Yeah, I try not to plumb those depths. It's very easy to go down those lurid roads, I guess. But no, Bobby, I found a lot of really great information. I found a lot of cool recordings from his band, The Orchestra, which played up in San Francisco quite a bit. Really interesting stuff. His relationship with Kenneth Anger, and his work on the Lucifer Rising soundtrack. Its relationship to the occult, which leads to Jimmy Page, which leads to Aleister Crowley. It's just, you know, you start getting into these, you know, magical, like hippie realms, and it's all very fascinating. Anyone that has an interest in 60s music, which I certainly do, will find it very easy to, you know, get drawn into it with the music and the lifestyle that was going on, you know.
You mean with your podcast?
Just with that, and then just in general, you know, it's just
because you're doing that very well by taking some of the songs like by the Mamas and Papas and just playing them and showing people, Scott McKenzie, what the mood was at the time, and it actually is quite pleasant to listen to some of them.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to find like you know, lesser known hits. Of course, you got to put like some of the heavy hitters in there. I mean, the Doors have a song about the Topanga Corral where Charlie's first band, the Milky Way, performed with. That was with Bobby Beausoleil and a fella named Ernest Knapp, who would later go on to work with the Beach Boys and Terry Melcher. It's like, see, it feels like it all kind of weaves together these.
Well, yeah, it's like every aspect of this case, if you want to call it that. If you start looking in one thing, it'll lead to about 10 other things. So it's the same with the music. Only the music, as I said, is is most people concentrate on the blood and the gore and the guts, and that's fine, and I'm interested in it too. But
Right.
the music is so important. Not only, I mean, Charlie said it was his religion, and it's clear from any account of his life you read that he was into music from about the time he could sing and bang out tunes on a piano. So
Right.
certainly, and I know that when he was incarcerated after his convictions, his main concern was always to get a guitar and be able to
Yeah.
play it. So, and I know that from personal experience. We sent him a couple and got out a couple. So it was definitely a huge priority in his life, and therefore very important to him. And of course, the influence he had on other people, it would be an influence on them too. The music would be an important part of his life. I mean, the piece I just played at the beginning of this is from what they call the family jams, and Charlie's not singing on it. That's Steve Grogan, but
Right.
those are all tunes that he wrote. And for what I kind of learned recently is what he would do is write a song, in his improvisational style, and the people around him would pick up on it and then kind of make it into a more structured song. So I think one of these songs we're hearing on the family jams and things are things that he might have considered to be throwaways, but people hearing them said, "Hey, that sounds pretty good. We should take that and work with it and turn it into a song." So, you have to consider, those songs as being his too, not just the family singing them, but they're his songs too.
Right. Right. That's a great album.
Yeah,
It's one of my favorites actually.
yeah,
And that's like what you said there is a great example. When you listen to Neil Young talk about meeting Charlie and being influenced by his music, that's what he focused in on, the fact that he had just a great knack of just a lyrical knack, I guess. Some of
mhm, mhm,
maybe his guitar playing wasn't exactly like standard or whatever, or orthodox, but his
mhm.
lyrical prowess was second to none, really.
Right,
Just
right,
improvisational
exactly.
music, I guess, is the
Right, right.
best way to put it.
Probably not much of a market for that in the music industry at the time. You're going to touch on the I guess you'd call it the incompatibility of Manson's music with what was accepted at the time as being commercial material.
Yeah, and then they didn't know how to market it, I guess. Even I guess it would both Greg Jacobson and Desper, I forget his first name right now, but he was the producer for the Beach Boys, the one that supposedly freaked out on acid at Spahn Ranch with his little
Oh,
mobile recording rig.
Mike DC or something. Mike,
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
Mike DC, right.
yeah.
You'll hear them talk about just Charlie not being able to take direction in the
Right.
studio, or his unwillingness to
Hmm.
do that. But I mean, a lot of great artists are kind of like that. I mean, they don't want their process to
Hmm.
be messed with. And back in those days, I feel like the studio was more in control. Nowadays, like when the artist goes in, the artist gets what they want. If they want,
Hmm.
it to sound like trash, it's the
Well,
the
yeah, he
just
could have been an
the
extreme
best.
example of wanting to do things his own way, because I wonder how many musicians go in and they say, "Well, we like your stuff, but we're going to change this and we're going to add horns and strings and everything else and make it better and add another verse, and can you give us another chorus?" And they
Yeah,
say, "Well, yeah, for the money I'll do it," but he wouldn't budge on anything, not a word, not a note. And
right,
I think
right,
that kind of gives lie to the uh, belief or the idea, the myth that he was concerned with being a success in the music business before anything else. Because I think if that had been true, he would have been making compromises like allowing his music to be changed, joining unions, for example, and all the
right.
things that he wouldn't put up with. So that to me is a contradiction of the myth of Charles Manson's obsession with being a successful recording star. I think
Yeah, I
personally that if it had fallen into his lap and they would have let him do everything he wanted perfectly, he possibly, and I really don't want to speak for him, but he possibly would have gone along with it. But
right.
otherwise, no way. I mean, he turned his back on it pretty easily. And plus, with his firsthand experience with seeing Dennis Wilson's, how the Brother Records treated him, and all the strings that were attached to his contracts were not something that somebody is. So Charlie's a free spirit. He didn't want any of that at all.
Yeah. I can also look at him feeling like he already was a rock star very quickly after getting, into it, because he was living at Dennis Wilson's house.
Mm-hmm.
He had, the luxurious surroundings, and basically his credit card, all his cars and stuff, if all that's to be believed,
Mm-hmm.
$100,000 worth of bills or whatever, supposedly they say but
I know. I want to see those receipts myself.
yeah, right. That'd be like $500,000 today.
Maybe more than that, but yeah, I
Right.
was
But
looking up some other figures today, and what they're worth today is like, whoa.
yep.
Back and then it seems like a lot of money or not. And it's a lot. It's a
Right.
lot of those amounts. So, do you have any favorite of music of Charlie's yourself? Let me ask you first of all, are you a musician?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
I
okay. What
play
do you
the
play?
I play the drums.
Okay.
And it's kind of like 90s rock, I guess, kind of, but
Okay.
we play all our own stuff. We don't do any covers or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy music. That's uh I I like Lie, and I like the Family Jams album. I have both of those on vinyl. I
Okay.
play
Oh,
them
wow.
a fair
Wow.
amount.
Okay.
Uh some of the stuff later on, when he was in prison, it's you know I can dip my toe in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the lyrics, but
Mm-hmm.
just some of the recording, it's so primitive, not by his.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't his fault. It's just
Right.
it's harder to listen to. You have to
Right.
really be like looking for something.
Well, you do, and I often listen to it when I'm driving long distances, and I hear things in his music that are really surprising. The way he can do the guitar, and especially in those circumstances, what he would take the earphone and plug it into the microphone jack, because he
Wow,
wasn't allowed to record anything. But
wow,
that's how he would get those recordings out. But you're right; they're not of the best quality, and some of them, though, are quite good. And as I said, you can listen to some and say, oh, that's really crude and rough. But then you hear other parts of it. I mean, I heard a thing on the Live from San Quentin album that to me initially sounded like noise.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
when I heard it again, I was like, this is great. This is genius.
right.
He was just strumming different guitar chords rather, and going in and out of this melody all the time, grunting and making guttural sounds. It didn't even sound like words, but it's.
And
I would like to possibly use it as an intro one of these times, one of these weeks.
sure. No,
Yeah,
it's super hypnotic
yeah,
music for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And can be and tends to be very propulsive sort of music. It
Mhm.
always feels like it's on the go.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's definitely there it seems like there's, if not a message in it, certainly describes what he was, his surroundings, whether it's
Mhm,
garbage dump, or
mhm,
some of the stuff from Lie, or the 67 recording
mhm,
sessions. It's kind of just like what is going on around them.
mhm,
Look at Your Game, Girl, I believe was written earlier in prison, and that was more taken from like a ballad sort of mentality that he was into at that time. Um,
mhm,
a lot of cool stuff. He was inspired a lot, I guess, by like Bing Crosby and the
mhm.
crooners. He'll say that a
Right.
lot in his interviews.
And when you hear that stuff on the 67 tape, a lot of it is he's like a lounge singer almost. Very good. His
Yeah,
voice is very strong at that recording and clear. Later on it got kind of rough, but you can see where he had definitely singing talent in those early tapes with some of the
right,
ranges he hits. And
right,
I find it also interesting in his music how often he goes back into his past and talks about some of the people he's met, hobos and people in jail and winos, and talking
right,
about things you don't really think about Charles Manson if you're believing he's this hippie person who only existed from 1967 on. I mean, the guy you're talking about, 1967 to 1969, that's 2 years out of a 35-year life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more going on in his life's experience. And, it's interesting to me how many of these things that sound like, not just in his songs, but in his interviews, that sound like nonsense. And then you read a little further and you'll see where he got the inspiration for that, like using Australian prison slang and things. It sounds like nonsense, but that's just things that he learned in prison, and he's
Right.
regurgitating them and putting them out in music. And there's a lot there that it might be a few years later and you hear something else from another source and you go, oh, it clicks. That's where he got that. That's what he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and going back to what he's learned from other people, that's a prime example would be like Creepy Carpus. If you believe that Charlie learned basically how to play guitar from Creepy Carpus, that dude, his music was even older. The music Creepy Carpus was playing.
Sure.
So that was probably some of the stuff that he was showing Charlie. So I mean, it just shows how far removed from being a hippie he really was musically, for sure.
Now, I'm just reminded in Lynette's book, Reflections, she recounts him singing a verse or two from a Victor Herbert song. I don't know if you found a recording of that, but it's in there. I can send you the page number later if you're interested. But it's another thing where he's singing this thing and it sounds like nonsense that he's making up. And then when you look into it, you research it, it was a popular vaudeville song from the 20s that he probably heard somewhere else and just learned as a kid. And he's just singing it again. And,
Right.
he's doing material that nobody's heard. I looked up that song so I could have permission to print the lyrics in the book. And it was so old that you didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
So,
it was just public domain.
yeah, right. It was recorded in 1905 or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Really put a lot of his personality and his life into his music. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, do you have any idea when your next one's going to come out? I mean, I know you've got 5 out so far, and they're about, what are they, 15, 20 minutes a piece?
Yeah, about a half an hour is about the max I've been able to do. I want to keep them pretty digestible. Again, it's kind of like, it's a fair amount of work, even just to get that much written out.
I know that.
I'm about 5 minutes of physical recording away. As soon as I can get that last little bit and then pull the songs in. So hopefully within a week or so, I'll have that next episode out. And then I'm trying to do one a month. That seems like a reasonable pace. The first 2 I kind of had stacked up, so I released them a little bit a little bit quicker than I normally will, just to try to get people hooked. But yeah, no, the plan is once a month. And I enjoy learning about it and finding the music connected to it. So I'm looking forward to moving forward,
Yeah, well, you get to some point where you've got to hit the record button, because otherwise you're just going to keep going and finding more and more stuff. So, and certainly you can't expect to be the definitive tale of this of his music with this podcast. But I'll tell you this: you're off to a very good start, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it when somebody takes the initiative to take on a project like that. Now, what inspired you to do this? What, just your own interest in music, or what inspired you to go to the trouble, if you will, want to call it that, to write and produce and put all these things together? Because you did a great job, and I very good, very good.
Wow, man, thank you. That means a lot coming from you, George. Some people know me as I guess Wilson Zephyr in the chats, and then in the community. I did a documentary on Bruce Fox, Stoner Van Houten. So, and the reason I did that started because I was very fascinated with Spahn Ranch. Okay. And Michael Channel's videos led me to Bruce. Bruce seemed a little bit more approachable, so I took one of his tours and became fascinated with his story. So I guess I'm it's another way for me to explore that time and space of Spahn Ranch, the 60s, and what Charlie was doing. So I guess that's what inspired me.
What got you initially interested in the whole? I guess you could call it the Charles Manson phenomenon, or I hate to use terms like
Yeah,
CLB because it's a universe really.
right.
What sucked you in?
Well, it would have been Helter Skelter, the book. I read that
Okay.
in high school,
Hmm.
and believed, like everyone normally does, that he was the boogeyman, the
Hmm.
devil, did
Sure.
all that crazy stuff.
Hmm.
And then as you get a little bit further down, you realize things aren't always as they seem, or maybe presented to you by
Hmm.
um, the government or the courts or whatever.
Hmm.
And then I became fascinated with the case as it is. It's like it's a crazy case in like uh jurisprudence. It's a really messed up case. It's illegal what they did,
Hmm. Hmm.
and um so I just, more than just the anything with those crimes, it's what they did, how they prosecuted him, that fascinates me the most.
Hmm.
How do they get
Hmm.
away with that stuff?
Hmm.
I guess. And
Well, they just put your picture in the paper and you're finished.
yeah,
So you're also attracted to Spahn Ranch, so you must have had some attraction to at least your perception of what the lifestyle of Charlie and his so-called family was. Uh, or were you just interested in Spahn Ranch because it's a location to go to?
it was one of the places that you could go to. I mean, I live on a farm out here in Maine, so I love nature, and I like
Yes, you are.
I like, I wanted to see the waterfalls. I wanted to see all that stuff. And,
Mhm.
the fact that there were still like relics out there. I mean,
Mhm.
I dragged poor Stoner down into the dune buggy graveyard to look at the
Mhm.
Volkswagens,
Yeah,
fighting off rattlesnakes and almost breaking our necks, and
sure.
poison
Yeah,
oak and whatnot.
yeah, that's
Um,
that's rough
I
out
love
there.
history, man. I like
Uh-huh.
history, and uh, it's it's the old west, and I like filmmaking. So
Mhm.
to see, to know that Spahn Ranch was used in all those movies, and
Mhm.
the Lone Ranger rock, like right,
Mhm.
or I'm sorry, it's the Lone Ranger rocks right across the way, all that. It's great up there.
Yeah, somebody, not you, because you're busy enough, but should probably do a podcast or some little show about all the films that were made at Spahn Ranch and isolate all the only thing I've ever been able to find at Spahn Ranch was it, but that movie that Randy Starr was in, The Creeping Terror or something. There's
Yeah,
a few seconds at the end where they drive past the outlaw shacks, but
there's
that's the
that.
only.
If you watch, there's like a couple like softcore, like porn movies where you can see the ranch, gosh, Ramrodder, of course, but
Okay.
there's Adeline, and oh god, it's a two word name. If
Yeah.
you go on IMDb, I believe Spawn Ranch has a
Okay.
page.
Has its own.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
okay. Very
I
good.
know there
Yeah.
was a sci-fi movie shot there,
Mhm.
like a black and white one, that's basically, I think, right where Charlie's Rock is, like right in that area.
Maybe that's The Creeping Terror.
Yeah, that could be
Looks
that
like
one.
some guy hiding under a rug or something.
Yep, yep.
It's a pretty funny movie. I think Mystery Science Theater even it took a shot at it once.
It's
I
definitely in that it's definitely in that realm for sure, for sure. George, do you have a favorite Charlie recording?
If I had to pick one song, I'd have to say it's "Walking Through Forever" off Commemoration. But
Okay.
there's so many of them that are good, and if I don't listen to them for a while, they sound even better. But if I had to single out one song, that would be it. And I believe I played it the intro to the first live podcast. But
Very
I
cool.
generally listen to them when I'm driving. Uh,
Right.
that's the way to do it. It's you really hear a lot.
How do you feel about, there's some people asking questions? Can should I
Oh
ask
yeah,
you
yeah.
via?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm not really.
Yeah, I don't mind. So I'll, in no particular particular order. Walrus Gumboot, George, do you know if there might be any more releases for the Atwa series on Magic Bullet
I
Records?
know nothing about that, so that's
Okay,
an easy
cool.
answer.
All right.
I just
Let's
thought
see if
that-
there's anything else here. Are you familiar with Transparency Records out of Los Angeles? They originally released the Family Jams album.
Well, they originally released it. Now that's funny because I remember when that came out, there was a fellow, the Family Jam CD. He had, I think he had the recording of the one they call Family Jams 2. And they said, well, we're putting out this Family Jams album. And we listened to it and said, well, there's a whole other set of songs that maybe you're not familiar with. So we gave him that tape. And that was a fellow named Michael Shepard. I met him in LA. That the one I'm talking about, the CD. I mean, I don't know who put anything out before that. I mean, the family. Are you talking about the Family Gems LP?
I don't know. It wasn't me. That was just a question from the chat.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. He didn't do what he was supposed to do either.
Oh, word. Okay. Yeah. Let's see if I'm just gonna scroll up and just to check to see one more here. I mentioned that I would try to do this.
As far as Stu was asking about Charlie swooning girls, I don't think he had to use his talent to swoon girls into the family.
I agree.
I don't think it was a tool for him. He was just playing, and some people liked it, and some people didn't. And you know, there's a lot more to this. Things that were, I believe, were more happenstance and casual than any intended plan to do anything. Recruiting followers and all that crazy stuff. You know, they're just friends, and you know, there's so much negative connotation put on anything Charlie did. It's always taken to the bad direction to the nth degree, and everything he did was a con. And you know, from personal experience, I had to wonder about that all the time. And certainly a lot of it was a con, especially when I knew him, because he was in a horrible situation. But outside, I don't think
I mean, we've been to we've all been to parties and seen someone playing the acoustic guitar. Doesn't mean we've gone off and followed them to the end of the earth. You know?
Some might, but some might not. And you know, he had a lot more experience meeting people, and you know, so I don't think there's anything to that.
Stoner asked me earlier to he said that when he was interviewing Lynette, she said that Sandy went to Monterey, the Monterey Pop Festival. Was that yeah, he was just kind of looking for, I guess, confirmation of that.
Yep.
That would have been something else. Wow. What a great.
I know. The Who and Jimi Hendrix making their debuts. It's hard to believe what music was like back then. It was so good.
Yeah, there's some really good footage of that. Luckily, you know, that in Woodstock, and there's a great documentary out on Laurel Canyon. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I believe it's just called Laurel Canyon. It's not the one with Bob Dylan's son. It's a different one. It's really well done.
Okay. Well, why don't you send me that in title in a Facebook message or whatever we're doing, and I'll try to take a look at it.
Absolutely.
To see that, because I'd like to see that. Does Sandy know where the Family Jams album was recorded? I don't have an answer to that, and she's not right next to me, so I can't answer.
Yep. Bruce showed us a really cool picture the other day of the stockpile of the Hendrickson material.
Mm-hmm.
That was just left over. And I know that he was filming them playing some of the Family Jams album material. So if that ever gets, any of that stuff ever gets released, that would be.
What's the status of his of Hendrix's material? Do you know?
It was purchased. It was all there was a huge auction, and Bruce has the picture of the just the cases and cases of film canisters.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a real big story. And I would love to see more material, whether it's the music stuff or just any of the filming that took place there on Spahn.
Well, I think more material is going to come out. It's amazing how much material doesn't come out to support some of the wilder theories about the situation, but anything that comes out is going to be good and more interesting. And I think as more stuff comes out and people get a little bit removed from the, horror of the crimes, they can take a little bit more realistic look at it and not just buy the DA's version of. Yeah, if all you read is the DA's book, that's fine. You're settled. It's one, two, three. It's there. But once you start looking anywhere else, it falls apart pretty quickly. So
Absolutely.
that has
Absolutely.
happened to a lot of people, and you and me, and a lot of people. And there's enough uh, 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 attention, or rather attraction from the case that they keep looking and looking and looking. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and
So,
hopefully people do find, as many different avenues into looking into this as they can, whether it's a
mhm,
true crime fascination, a
mhm,
music fascination.
mhm,
You could be into, like I said, movies and be into Spahn Ranch and then find it, that way,
mhm,
it's many different ways into the story for sure.
mhm,
And, again, to like get back to the fact that Charlie certainly wasn't a failed musician, and I
mhm,
don't. Every time I hear that being used as some sort of motive that he felt like he may have felt slighted
mhm,
from the 2020 album and cease to
Sure.
exist
Well,
for
well,
sure.
justifiably. I mean, come on. He got screwed on that. No question about it. That's not paranoia.
But I think Charlie was on a perfect musical track up until Lots of Papa, and that's when it went sideways.
Mm-hmm.
Because Terry Melcher, Greg Jacobson, that whole crew knew who Lots of Papa was. Supposedly,
Hmm.
they whether they had bought drugs off him or he was just that much of a known quantity. As soon
Hmm.
as they found out that Charlie had shot someone, maybe it wasn't even the fact that it was Lots of Papa, just the fact that
Hmm.
he had shot someone. Then I mean, I'm guessing your musical career is gonna maybe go a little sideways.
Yeah, okay, because that would have happened after Melcher went to the ranch to do his recording audition.
Right.
So, uh, yeah, I don't know how that would have gotten out, but the theory is it got out. People say that Brian Lukashevsky was present at the shooting, but a lot of testify as to everybody who was there, and Brian was not. So I don't know how they. Of course, the trial testimony is pretty sloppy anyway,
Yeah.
uh, but so I don't know what the connection is there, but certainly everything went south after lots of pop, and we have Charles Watson to thanks for that, and
Right.
thanks for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just another example of that for sure, Uh, yeah, no, like I said, I'm planning on getting my next episode out, um, you know, by next week. So
Okay.
people, anyone that wants to, kind of subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify
Mhm.
or Apple Podcasts, really wherever, that's going to be the best way to kind of keep up with that
And
journey.
let's say the name of the podcast. I should have had it up on a banner,
No,
but
it's
it's
all right.
called
It's
All Is None, and look for it. And like I say, they're easy to listen to. They're well done, well written. Just a real refreshing bit of stuff into the mix is what it is.
no, and
You did you did a good job.
I'm gonna do my best to just kind of stay on that track. And if once I get done telling the story, as I have it sort of written out, I wouldn't be opposed to having guests on that are knowledgeable and are
Hmm.
willing to talk about it.
Great, great.
Whether it would be yourself. I mean, I do. Again, I don't like to pick sides in all these in this community. So I do talk to people like Nicholas Schreck. I'll
Sure,
I'll speak with Michael Chance. I'll talk to anyone
sure.
who knows about it, because I'm not looking to try to like solve anything outside of a musical discussion with this particular project.
Right. Well,
You know,
that's the right attitude to have. I mean, I go into this thing, I don't have any really interest in personalities, and maybe some people do things that upset me, but it doesn't mean that I'm against that. Well, there are some people that I'm against, but it doesn't mean that we're enemies or in camps or anything like that, because
right,
I think
right,
we're all trying to figure out what happened. And unless people and have an ego that gets in the way of that, it shouldn't be a problem, and everybody should be talking to everybody else. And that's one reason I did this podcast, is so I can have people on here, anybody who wants to come on here and talk about anything,
Yeah, yeah.
because that's the way to get knowledge and enlightenment. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm glad to have you back on. Certainly,
No, I
all of
appreciate it, and it
podcasts.
the last time was a little bit different. We were talking about, a little bit more of the nitty-gritty stuff, the
Mhm,
blood
mhm.
and some of that, which, is uh upsetting, but also interesting. And if we're going to be looking into it as a necessity, really. But
Well, yeah, it
it's
is.
nice to be
I think
just
it's very
talking
interesting.
about something different.
Right. Yeah, I think it's all very interesting too. Even if I don't think is relevant to my point of view about what happened, it's still interesting, and you can talk about it. And so this case is pretty much endless when it comes to topics and things to talk about. But the music is certainly a huge part of it and should be talked about very much. And I'm glad that you've taken it upon yourself to create this podcast series. All is None, an examination of Charles Manson's music and the music that surrounded him. And that's good to put in the music that surrounded him, because it is a bigger picture. It's not just his music. It is, as you said, it's the music of the times. It's Melchor's music. It's the music he grew up with. It's more than just listening to his music and analyzing it. There's things around going on around him, the people he
Right.
knew. And are you going to be able to get into much of his contacts in the entertainment industry in like 1968, 1969, and people he knew? And
I know, like, Mo Austin definitely comes up. Russ Regan, the whole uh, Uni Records and Universal Pictures is kind of very interesting, because I guess Greg Jacobson wanted to make a film and a
Mhm,
documentary, which may have
mhm,
been, you know, wrapped up, with that. Um, the Jesus movie that they wanted to make,
mhm,
where the Jesus character was going to be African American, and then they wanted Charlie to be like a consultant or something
mhm.
on that. That
Yeah,
gets all tied in with Universal Pictures and Uni Records and
yeah.
stuff like that. Definitely been down uh, that um, line of thinking, and it
Mhm.
comes up on basically in the next episode is when we're dealing
Oh,
with
okay.
Uni Records and Gold Star Studios. That's when these were all the contacts through Phil Kaufman
Mhm,
that are starting to be cashed in basically at this
mhm.
point.
Okay.
Um, yep. And I guess, I mean, Harold True even was friends with Gary Stromberg. I
There you
guess
see.
Gary Stromberg had quite um, a a drug problem back in the day, and even
Mhm,
had he's been pretty open about it, and I believe he's some sort of a counselor even at this point
mhm,
for drugs. So
mhm,
again, being tied in with Harold True, Phil Kaufman, and then leading Charlie right into Gold Star Recording Studio, where
mhm,
that's where the Wall of Sound was, that concrete echo chamber designed by uh, Gold of Gold Star Studios. So
mhm.
this is all stuff for the next episode.
Is that Wall of Sound Phil Spector?
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
he ended up in Foo with Charlie, didn't he?
What was that?
Didn't he end up in Foo with Charlie after
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I didn't
he got
know.
murder? I don't know where he ended up, but I don't know if they put him in a protective housing unit at Corcoran or where
Oh,
he
he would
ended
have
up.
had to have been. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
They were
that
neighbors after all.
that would, that would be an interesting pairing. Good to see
Um,
you after all this time. How you
yeah,
doing?
seriously, seriously. But all
But
the music that came out of these studios that Charlie was in, it just goes to show he was not a joke in the music industry at all. He was
no.
very serious. He was being taken very serious.
Hmm.
And yeah, even like some of the later podcasts are going to be about, Guns N' Roses doing, covering Charlie's music, the
Hmm. Great.
um, various other people, covering his music or trying to be involved in, putting his music out there.
Hmm.
I'm gonna keep it as positive as I can be. I'm not gonna get
Hmm.
into I mean, I'll discuss that, maybe people took advantage occasionally. No one's gonna be called out, but the fact that he may have stumbled because of people doing the wrong thing with his music, is part of the story. You get 9 Inch Nails later on down the road recording in the Cielo Drive house. I mean, that's not related to Manson personally, but it's related to the crimes blamed on him, of
It's kind of
course.
like it's sort of like the music that surrounds him. And I mean, can you believe they rented the house without knowing? I mean,
No,
well,
he absolutely knew that what house he was renting.
yeah. Did you
You
ever
don't.
get out? You said you like to go out to Spahn Ranch. Did you ever go out to Barker Ranch?
I haven't been there yet. I would
Yeah.
love to get out there. I would love to get out there.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it's in the state that. I mean, I was interested in the case back when it was still there, and you
Yeah.
could go see it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I missed that
Yeah.
window.
I'll tell you, that was something really when you could do that.
Yeah, I it's still on the list. I would also, I
Yeah.
mean, being on the East Coast, I wouldn't mind getting out to
Yeah.
Ohio and seeing some of his childhood stuff too.
Hmm.
Being a little bit closer
Hmm.
in California for
Yeah,
me.
talking about Barker Ranch, I don't want to get too much off topic, but when I
No,
first
it's
started
fine.
going out there, it was 1980, and nobody knew how to get there. Nobody had four-wheel drive vehicles, and there was no GPS. And so it was really, when I lived in Death Valley, people knew I knew where it was, so they would like, "Hey, can you take us out there?" Oh, sure, free ride, So
Wow.
I could do a whole show on that, but I don't want to.
That would be
We spend quite a bit of time out there, Sandy and I, in the
yeah, that would
90s.
be very interesting to hear about. And I'm sure you have great stories about, what you saw out there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I haven't been out there since a little bit after the Park Service cleaned the place up, but I
Yeah.
haven't been out there in a while.
No, I know there's a crew that goes out there that I could maybe catch a ride with. And hopefully I will make that happen at some point for sure.
Well, it's a beautiful location, even if the buildings aren't there. I mean, the bunkhouse is still there. I understand. The part of the chicken coop is still there, and enough of the main house is still there that you can see where everything was. But it's still just a beautiful place. If you're just standing in the yard, you can see behind me is what I love. That's the view looking down Goler Wash from the front yard.
Oh,
That's one of
that's
my
awesome.
favorite views. The sunset right down there. We would watch the sun go back and forth as the year progressed, going from north to south and equinox to solstice and all this other stuff. And we used to go out there quite a bit.
Yeah,
But
that's the Atwa. If you got to be into nature to be into some of these places, man, and
yeah,
really
yeah,
understand it.
yeah. Well, that's really a powerful place, and they're definitely a power spot. So, well, that's great. We're looking forward to seeing your next podcast, and we'll
Thank
do
you.
everything we can to promote it. I can make a mention of it on the Facebook page for this podcast because
I
I
really
really think
appreciate it.
recommend it to everyone, and you're doing a great job. So, I don't know if you have anything else you want to discuss tonight since we're here. Do you have any other questions about anything not related to music or
Oh, geez, no, I don't
topics?
think so. I was just kind of scrolling the
Okay.
questions here to see if there was
I do have
anything.
a garden, okay, Walrus Gumbo. I'll answer that question. I do have a garden, and what have I planted? A broccoli, broccolini, beets, chard, uh, strawberries, sun gold tomato, cucumbers. Yeah, I have a garden. Definitely, we have a garden. Yep.
That's awesome. Yep. No, it's planting season here in Maine too. So we're
Uh,
getting everything in the ground here too. Finally getting some nice weather.
yeah. Well, with the price of food, you better grow your own. You better know how to do it anyway.
Yeah, that our chickens are happy and the goats are happy. But
Chickens and goats. I like that.
yes, sir.
We
But
haven't gotten any chickens. We lost all ours in the fire, but we haven't gotten chickens back yet. We'll have to build a coop and a little yard for them.
yeah, no, it's
How many
great. It's
chickens do you
great to
have?
have. Let's see. We have 4 that are full grown right now, a
Okay.
rooster, and then my wife just bred a full, I don't know, there's probably 20 some odd
Oh,
a
okay.
brooder down there
Oh,
because we
yeah.
lost the majority of our chickens last year due to a fox attack.
Yeah.
it can happen sometimes.
Yeah, well, we had a bunch that we got in a brooder and we were raising them, and the raccoons got in there, and it was not a
Yep.
pretty sight the next
Oh
day.
no, it's vicious. Yep.
Pretty ugly. Actually, it was looked like it was
A place you can think of.
mass
Yeah.
burial. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
Yes, sir.
And they got
I
a little thing like this, they got in.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. You gotta really, if you're gonna keep animals safe, you gotta be diligent and
And
keep.
you have goats too?
Yes, sir. 3 of them.
Wow, how much land do you have?
Oh, about 10 acres, I guess.
Wow. Oh
Yep.
boy. You grow stuff there?
What's
I
up?
mean,
Oh yeah, like
you
just
farm it?
veggies,
Yeah.
and marijuana's legal up here, so
Okay,
all sorts of good stuff.
sure.
Yep. It's
Great.
it's it's ideal for sure.
Good.
But
Maine doesn't, you get a pretty good growing season up there?
we got about like 4 months.
Okay.
Yep, yep, and then it's pretty much winter.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's cold for sure.
Yeah. Well,
That's
that sounds like a great setup. Do you work from home or are you able to?
yeah, for the most part, and then kind of just work at a dispensary, actually, a local
Oh, okay.
dispensary.
Oh,
So
okay.
trimming weed, rolling joints. It's
Okay.
really rough for me, George.
Yeah, I know. You have to know everything. Now, when people come in and they say, "What do you like?" Do you really know all the products that well, or are you just making it up? I just wondered.
Uh, my tolerance is pretty. I'm not a good judge. Let's put it that
Okay.
way. Oh
Well,
my goodness.
sometimes you go in and you wonder if these people have been, have gone to a crash course in school to know all their products and tell you exactly what they'll do. And I don't know if they really know all that stuff, but
Eh,
I don't
my
want to get
goodness.
too far off topic or give up too
No,
much.
that's true. George, thank you again for having me back.
Okay. Very glad to have you on. And I'll tell you, we can have you on again as this progresses because, as I say, so far, so good. And very,
Thanks. I really
very, very good job. And I want to recommend once again to everybody, listen to this podcast. All is none.
thank you. Like and
And it's
subscribe, I
available.
guess they say.
Yeah, it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those other places. So that's great. Very
Absolutely.
good.
Thank you, George, and thank
Thank
you
you.
everyone for tuning in.
Yes.
Really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, that's it, everybody. I'm going to leave you up here for a little while longer while we sign off, if I can do this without doing it. And so there's the intro, and that's the thing. We'll say good night for this episode of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. I want to thank my guest, Jason Hay, for doing his podcast, All Is None, and for coming on tonight and talking about it. I want you all to go listen to his podcast, enjoy Charlie's music, and get some idea of how relevant it is and to the music around him. Very good. Very good. Okay, so I guess we're going to sign off. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming, and we will see you next time on the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.
This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.